see how to apply this UV mapping techniques to an object a bit more complex, like a cube instead of a plane. So first of all, I will delete this cube here because it's already have a material by default, which I don't want. So X delete. Again, I'll change the engine to cycle render, and I will create a cube here and change to a texture cube with Alt Z. I'm going to open the material menu, create a new material, rename the material cube texture, and again, instead of a color, I want an image texture. Good. Next thing is to create a new image, a grid, a color grid, where I will generate a color grid, no alpha, and I press OK. Good. Now I can add this image to the material. So here you see, if you open the material preview, you see the material mapped on a preview object, but here, because the cube is not unwrapped yet, you cannot see the material, the texture, the image mapped on the cube. So we are going to unwrap the cube as we did previously with the plane. So I press Tab to go in edit mode, shading, I go down to UVs and press unwrap. Unwrap. Okay, so it's working more or less, except that by default the unwrap menu will take each face of the cube and align its UV to the whole image, which I don't really want. So one method would be to simply select a face one by one and to readjust it in the UV panel. So now you see the image on top of my cube is represented only by this section of the image. I can move this somewhere else and even outside the image, because this image, it's actually repeated in every direction. And I can do this for the other faces too, and every time change and move it somewhere else, okay, etc., etc. So this is one method of doing that. With complex object, it can be very, very long and inaccurate to proceed like that, because then I have to readjust the exact size of my face, and they are not connected. So another method will be to unwrap the object by cutting seams, as I would do with a paper cube, for example. So I'm going to reset the UV mapping. So in UV mapping, reset. So I'm back to the original unwrap that I did previously. And I'm going to mark seams where I want the edges to be cut. So for that, I go in edges mode and I will start cutting, for example, these 3 seams. So I want this face to open on top with this part still connected to the rest of the cube. And I click on Mark Seam. Sorry. Mark Seam. Now if I deselect everything with A, you see these seams are marked in red. Okay, so you imagine I open that. I will also open this and these sides the other way, so I select them that way and that way and mark the seams. Good. And now the last faces have to be connected to the cube. So now you see every face is connected to a part of the cube and there is no face left apart, but I can also open it completely in 2 dimensions. So I'm going to select them all and again click Unwrap. And now you see I have this typical cube net that is properly open. I could have opened it in a different way, but this one will work perfectly. You see now that the texture on each face of the cube are not a different part of the image, which is what I wanted. So all I have to do from now is to go in edit mode, have all my UVs selected, and in the UV menu export them, export the layout, the UV layout, so I can use it, for example, in another program like Photoshop or Illustrator. So I'm going to rename cube layout export, and in the next video I'll show you to play with this layout and re-import the final in Blender.